At 5:37 p.m. Can I get a confirmation for quorum?
Yes.
Okay, great. Sure. So for those of you that didn't hear that, we actually don't have a quorum, but since this is a workshop, we're going to continue. And I also wanted to extend the invitation for the PUBCAP, if they can go ahead and open up their meeting.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Patricia Cavazos. I am the PUBCAP chair. Thank you for being here on this cold, dreary evening. It is 5:38, so at this time I call the meeting to order. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Lina Alvarez for the Integrated Resource Plan.
Thank you, ma'am. Good evening. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Last time we did have a little bit of issues with the microphone, but it's been fixed. My name is Lina Alvarez. I am Brownsville Public Utilities Board Energy Risk Manager. And I am the project manager for the Integrated Resource Plan. That being said, I think it's important that we talk about how this workshop was organized and that I recognize my fellow coworkers. I did get quite a bit of help from the IT department. Now the microphones, you can actually hear me. They done a great job. I also got a lot of help from the public relations group. Thank you, Alexa, and your group for assisting with the setup. I also got quite a bit of help from the key accounts with getting some of the names and the addresses, emails, and so on and so forth, and our administrative staff as well. Thank you, Norma, Ricardo, and Alma for putting all this together, the agendas and everything that goes with it. So as you all know, BPUB is in the process of developing an updated integrated resource plan. And the board of directors requested that PUBCAP members and leaders of the community participate in the process and serve as the voice of the customer. Before we get started, we'll appreciate if everyone could introduce themselves. So we'll go around. I'll start with the consulting team and then move around the tables. Yes. Okay.
Okay, just to repeat that, we did, we're asking if we had any public comments, and we don't have any public comments at this time.
Thank you. Okay, so if we can start with our consulting team. Glenn, you want to come in and say a few words about yourself? Sure.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Glenn Justice. I'm a partner with Experience on Demand. We've had the opportunity to work with Brownsville PUB for quite a few years, actually. In this case, we're acting as an extension of staff to help do technical reviews on some of the work products for the IRP, as well as to help facilitate tonight's session. So thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Rob?
Hi, everybody. I'm Rob Petrolak, and my firm, Petrolak Energy Advisors, was selected by Brownsville to help out in performing the integrated resource plan. And so I'll be talking with you a little bit more about that. Nice to be here. Thank you.
And then Mark.
Good evening. My name is Mark Kwan. I'm with Itron Incorporated. I'm a principal forecasting consultant. I've been with Itron 28 years now. We work with Rob Petrolak and developing the integrated resource plan. My component, is the load forecasting side. So tonight I'm going to be presenting a deeper look into how the long-term forecast is developed and what the results are.
Thank you all. If we can get started going around the tables, and if you can say a few words about yourself, that would be great. Thank you.
Hello again, I'm Patricia Cavazos. I work with BISD, and I am the PUBCAP chair. My first year was last year, so this is my second year. So thank you, and glad to be here.
Thank you.
I work with both of us associates. I'm an accountant and business manager here in PUBCAP.
Thank you.
Howdy, my name is Joseph Holman. I am on the PUB board, and this is my third year here.
Good evening, Chester Gonzalez, PUBCAP board member, and I'm an attorney.
Good evening, David Ramirez, CEO of the Brownsville South Padre Island Board of Realtors, Hubcap member, and it's my first year.
Good evening. Jerry Briones, I'm with the Greater Brownsville Incentives Corporation, Deputy Executive Director.
Daniela Sosa, PUBCAP member, and I do SBA lending.
Eliasa Rodriguez, I work with the Greater Brownsville Incentives Corporation. I'm the Director of Industrial Park Development.
Gerardo Martinez, PUB Board Vice Chair.
Hello, my name is Luz Marshall with the Brownsville Independent School District. With the PUBCAP, and this is my second year.
My name is Carmen Nordyke. I'm an insurance broker, and this is my first year with PUBCAP.
Good evening. My name is John Cowan. I'm the mayor of the city of Brownsville and also on the PUB board.
Thank you. Go ahead and go.
Hello, my name is Marilyn Gilbert, and I'm the General Manager and CEO for the Brownsville Public Utilities Board.
I'm Mark Dombrowski. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Brownsville PUB.
Good evening, Constanza Minor. I'm the Chief Administrative Officer for BPUB.
Yeah, good evening. Mike Perez, Chief Financial Officer, BPUB.
Good evening, Paul Gonzalez, General Counsel and Chief Legal Officer for PUB.
Thank you all. And welcome everyone, and thank you for being here with us tonight. This is workshop number 2 of a set of 4 workshops. And today's topics include the IRP variable assumptions. It also includes, Mark will be covering the load forecast methodology, and Rob will cover the resource options. After that, at the end, we will have an evaluation matrix exercise. So be ready to get up and work on the boards. It should be fun. In today's meeting, we're requesting your participation. Of course, your opinions and guidance are important for the integrated resource plan. And also, we'll be working on the evaluation criteria. We're looking forward to working with each of you and making this project a success. And I'm here to facilitate any way I can, so please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or if I can be of any assistance. We'll begin with Rob. Go ahead. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Lena, and again, thanks everyone for your participation. I see some familiar faces out there from the first workshop, so a little closer. I see some familiar faces from the first workshop, so it's good to see you guys again. I'm seeing some new faces as well, and like Lena, mentioned, we're gonna kind of do a little recap of what we covered in the first workshop, start off with. And Mark is going to come up and he's going to talk in more detail about the load forecast. If you remember, we spoke a little bit about that last time. He's going to get into a little bit more detail about how we went about doing that. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the assumptions and the variables that we're going to be using in the resource plan. And that's going to really be kind of the first hour and really what we're going to cover in that. And that's going to be a presentation. This format tonight is going to be a little different than last time. So we have an hour presentation roughly. It might go quicker than that. And then we have about 2 hours an exercise where we're going to be looking for very specific input on the types of attributes that Brownsville customers would be interested in having incorporated in the evaluation components of the integrated resource plan. And so we have an interactive session where we're going to be asking you to identify some attributes that that are important to you or you feel that is important to the community. And then we're going to have an opportunity where we're going to break up into groups And you're going to help summarize those into statements. And I'm going to ask, someone from each of the teams to actually present to all of us, basically what those statements are. And then at the end, we're going to have an opportunity to go around and rank, which ones are most important. So it's a fun exercise. We're going to learn a little bit about what's on our minds, and we're going to have the opportunity to, have a two-way dialogue, talk, ask questions. That's the type of format that we're going to have for this second part of this. So, yeah, if you can go ahead and hit the next slide. Or, I'm sorry, I have it here. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the first workshop and what we covered. So obviously in the first workshop, we had an opportunity to talk a little bit about what a resource plan is. And if you remember, what typical resource plans try to do is we try to look at basically the load, the demand for the community. We match that up with the supply resources, and you're trying to figure out, well, what's the best mix for the community? And you typically try to balance that. I describe it as a three-legged stool. One leg is, environmental attributes. There might be some environmental issues that you want to incorporate as part of your plan, whether it's a lower carbon, lower NOx or SOx emissions. It might be land use. Are we using the land properly? Are there any noise, where things would be located? There might be certain things that are important to the community, and we want to capture that. So, like I said, it's environmental, it's economic. So, items like, how's it impact our bill? What's it going to cost, the Brownsville PUB? And then the third leg is around reliability. And the whole concept of making sure that we have voltage stability, that the system is, able to be operated safely, and we're able to meet the needs of our customers. So that's really the high level of what we talked about around the integrated resource plan. The second thing we talked about was, if you recall, we talked about the mega trends that are really driving the industry. And we talked about, this electrification of that everyone's talking about, the AI and the data centers and the Bitcoin operations, and, a lot of the industry that's, that is coming in Texas. And I think last time we talked about, ERCOT is expecting that the electric load is going to actually double by 2030 in ERCOT in all of Texas. And obviously, you guys have seen significant growth in this area with SpaceX and the LNG facilities and just the inherent growth. One of the participants here was talking about just the influx of people coming into the area. So, we're impacted by, a lot of different things, and we expect, demand to be increasing, and so that's one of the mega trends. A couple of the other ones we talked about was around the focus on resiliency, and another focus on integrating renewables. We've seen a tremendous amount of renewables coming in across the country, especially here in Texas, and that's something that, the industry has just seen, really all over the United States. And then the other thing that we talked about last time was we talked about the workshops. And so we had the first workshop, which we covered back in December. We have this one, which this workshop, as Lena indicated, the main focus of it is to really establish what type of evaluation criteria do we want to capture as part of this integrated resource plan, what's important to the community. And then the next one, which is February 26th, that's where we're going to actually have taken the input from here, and we're going to have done the analysis, and then we're going to come back and we're going to share with you results and what resource plans may be ranked the highest based on the input that we're getting from you this evening and some of the criteria that we incorporate as part of that. And so that's for the next meeting. And then the other thing that we talked about last time was, if you recall, we talked about, the analysis and how this is a pretty complicated analysis. We actually, develop a 25-year load forecast for the city of Brownsville, and Mark's going to get into the detail on how he did that. Him and his team had done that. But, basically we come up with an hourly forecast for the next 25 years for Brownsville, for the city of Brownsville. And then we have a model we use, if you recall, Encompass, and it's a very sophisticated model where we put in all the resources that Brownsville has. We put in our forecast for energy, for fuel. We have the transmission incorporated into the model. And we are actually running the city of Brownsville, and the model is actually solving at an energy price and actually calculating each hour over the next 25 years, basically how much energy Brownsville is going to be buying and what the resources are going to be selling, and it nets out into a net system operating cost. And so we'll have a forecast of 25 years for the city of Brownsville. So it's a pretty detailed one. And then we talked about how we're going to be not only looking at that under a base scenario, which is the business as usual, how we expect things to develop, but we're going to stress test it. And we have 8 different scenarios, and you can kind of see them lined up. They're a little small up there, but I went through those different scenarios, and we're going to stress test under high electricity build out, high natural gas price scenarios, or low natural gas price scenarios, and we're going to stress test it like that. And then basically then we're going to incorporate the work that we do tonight as part of that evaluation. So with that, I'm going to go ahead. That really summarizes what we did in the first workshop. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mark. He's going to talk a little bit about the load forecast, and then I'm going to come back up and talk a little bit more about some of the assumptions, and then get into what we're going to do for the remainder of the night. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mark, you got the floor. Thank you, Rob. All right, as mentioned, I'm Mark Kwan. I'm with Itron. I developed me and my team developed the load forecast for BPUB. What we're going to do tonight is, at a high level, cover what the forecast looks like, what those key assumptions are. And at this point, before we actually get into the numbers, I just want to give an invitation to you to just go ahead and ask questions. There is a significant amount of analysis that goes behind development of the load forecast, or to put it a different way, there's a significant amount of analysis that goes to developing effectively a single number. So anything that you're interested in, I got the magic box called the computer over there that has everything I need if you have a deep question to find the answer. Okay, so with that, let's go ahead and begin. I wanted to start with something just to lay the energy picture for the United States into context. What you're looking at here is United States electric demand from 1974 through 2023. You've got 3 lines up there. The blue line is residential electric sales, the red line is commercial, and the green line is industrial. The graph here has faded gray regions which approximate the United States recessions since 1974. This becomes the very interesting picture of what we do as load forecasters. Our job is to guess what's going to happen next. If we were sitting back in 1980, knowing the picture we see today, life of a load forecaster would be pretty easy. You could just drop a simple ruler on the line and project that forward. Something happened in 2008 which caught the entire industry by surprise. Okay, now I'll just draw your attention, just focus on the blue line, the residential sales, something we can all understand. In 2008, coming out of the Great Recession, residential electric sales in the United States flattened. Growth disappeared. In 2009, after the Great Recession, utilities had the fundamental belief that electric sales would snap right back to where they're supposed to be. It didn't happen. In 2010, electric utilities believed that electric sales would continue along the long-term trend from 1974 to 2008, and it didn't happen. Same thing in 2011 and 12. And the industry came to realize that residential electric sales were never going to grow again, much to the chagrin of most utility executives, because it raises the question of where's my revenues going to come from? So for the last decade, we've seen flat residential electric sales growth. On the very rightmost gray bar, you see the recession caused by COVID, and coming out of COVID, you see that blue line jump up. Now, what we say in load forecasting, one data point doesn't make a trend. So, coming out of the great COVID recession, we asked the question, I wonder why electric sales have gone up. Everyone grabbed to the obvious. Oh, it's probably all the work from home. We're all at home. When we're supposed to be at the office, we're running our air conditioning unit, residential sales have gone up. So it kind of makes sense. The story holds. 2021, COVID starts to wane, sales don't drop. 2022, I think you're all back in the office. Sales haven't dropped. 2023, sales continue to not have dropped. So what is happening in our industry? We see we're at the cusp of perhaps a new trend developing in the electric industry. What is happening? The truth is, nobody really knows yet. But the things that we're watching are post-COVID impacts. Are we truly in a world where people are no longer going to be working in the office? We're clearly not going back to pre-COVID, but post-COVID, immediately post-COVID, we're probably not going to be there either. But that, of course, is a matter of debate and speculation. Rob's mentioned electrification. We're seeing across the United States pressure to electrify all our homes. If you're old enough to remember the gold medallion homes of the 1970s, when General Electric was touting that every new home would have all electric appliances, are we moving back to that era? Definitely we're seeing different parts of the country respond in that way. There are areas in California where if you build a new home, it's all electric. No longer using natural gas for cooking and heating. But that's city by city. It hasn't happened across the country yet. Is it going to happen? That's an area of debate. And you guys, working as board members and interested in your local utility, this is an area that you should be thinking about. Is this going to be a concern for you? The last area is the impact of electric vehicles. Just out of my curiosity, how many of you guys have an electric vehicle? Okay, 1 out of 30, right? Okay, so is this uptake? You don't have to raise it high, right? A little embarrassed, right? Look, I got one. My wife pushed me to buy one this last year. Is this uptake since the COVID increase from electric vehicles? If you just look at this room and you consider that those are national numbers, can't be true. Yeah, part of it might be true, but that's not solely responsible for the uptake. But definitely, electric vehicles represent one of the great uncertainties out there for our industry. What would the new technology adoption look like? Fast, slow, large, small? Or is it going to be a passing fad and going to be replaced by something else? The bottom line is our industry's seeing a lot of changes, and we're starting to see the emergence of potentially new trends. That's what we want to be thinking about when we develop the load forecast. What you see here on the grid below are just annual average growth rates. Just step back and take a look at the residential numbers. Since 1974, about 2.5% annual average growth. Since 2008, the flattening, what are we looking at? About 0.5% growth. If you know nothing about load forecasting and you're going to guess what happens next year, it would be a pretty good bet to pick 0.5%, because that's the recent trend. But that's not an IRP. An IRP is looking forward 30 years. So what are those growth trends going to look like? That's what we're doing in the load forecast. Now, what underpins our load forecast are some key assumptions. We walked through these in the first meeting, so let me just hit the highlights again. We acquire an economic forecast. Underlying the long-term forecast depends on what the economy is going to do. We acquire our economic forecast from Woods & Poole. They're a demographic forecaster. They develop their long-term forecast based on demographics. If you know the population growth, you know how many households you have. People have to work somewhere. So because you know how many people there are and how many households there are, they can then estimate and forecast employment. Jobs create dollars, so they can forecast GDP. In the long term, they develop the projection based on current and projected long-term demographic trends. That's the Woods & Poole forecast. We're using their version of the Cameron County forecast. We also know our load forecast is driven by weather. You know it. When it's hot, you turn on air conditioning. When it's cold, like today, you probably turn on your heater. That's going to consume electricity. Question: what kind of weather are we going to expect in 10 or 20 or 30 years? The assumption that sits behind here is what we call a 20-year normal, which is basically we take a look at the last 20 years and we're going to average the last 20 years to create the forecasted projections. So it's a 20-year normal. Just so happens that around the United States, about 45% of the utilities use 20-year normals. About 35% are using 30-year normals. And the remainder are doing 10 or some odd number of years. We chose 20 years because it represents what, not a more majority, plurality, I think that's the right word, of utilities are using. So we're driven by economics. The weather's picked up by the 20-year normal. We are going to then add into there some of the major uncertainties that are known in the utility industry. We're going to put in a projection of electric vehicles, and we're going to put in a projection of behind-the-meter solar. Electric vehicles obviously have an upward pressure. Solar has a downward pressure. Incorporated into the forecast, we recognize that everything in your home will be replaced over the next 30 years. If you have a refrigerator, and I know you do, that's going to break someday. That's going to be sad, and you're going to have to replace it. And I can almost guarantee you today that the refrigerator you replace that breaks will be more efficient than the one that you're replacing. The new one will be more efficient than the old one. So changing energy efficiency standards need to be represented in the model, and we're picking up all the new or existing, let me phrase it this way, we're putting into the forecast all legally adopted codes and standards from the national level. Those codes and standards come from the Energy Information Administration forecast. The Energy Information Administration is the nonpartisan arm of the federal government. The way I think of it is that when Congress enacts energy policy and they say, what will it do? EIA has the baseline forecast that says this is what we expect, and energy policy is measured against it. It's the nonpartisan arm of the federal government. Those energy efficiency codes and standards are incorporated into our long-term forecast. The last key assumption, and this is the biggest wild card out there that we saw in your utility, is what's going to happen with these expected or hinted at large customers. So there's a rumbling of some large customers coming into the service territory, expansions of facilities, new construction. How certain are we they're going to be here? So we're going to run a scenario to capture that, recognizing that we're going to exclude them from the base forecast. But we'll run a scenario so that we can actually manage that risk. Now what that means is we're going to take all these assumptions and then we're going to put them into basically 4 cases. There's a base case that represents native growth. This is what we expect to happen based on the economics, the weather, the nationally adopted codes and standards, and our expected base case or expectations for electric vehicles and behind-the-meter solar. That's base case. We're going to take that base case and we're going to flex it up and we're going to flex it down. Flex it up for extreme weather. Extreme weather represents a 1 in 10 scenario on the heating and the cooling side. What does 1 in 10 mean? It means, very simply put, if you look at the last 10 years of your summers, be the hottest summer. We're doing 20-year normals. So, not the hottest summer, it's the second hottest summer. We do it also on the winter side. What's the second coldest winter? We put those together to construct the extreme weather scenario lifting up the forecast. Mild, same thing on the low side. You have risk on the upside, you have risk on the downside, so we bound the base forecast with high or extreme and mild weather. And the last one shown up here in red is the large customer forecast. What happens if we bring in the expected value of these new customer additions? We'll run that case as well. Other cases that aren't highlighted were things that we looked at, but we didn't develop the forecast, but they're not going to be passed on to the supply side of the IRP process. I think I'm going to pause here. Are there any questions about the fundamental assumptions before I show the method and the results? Question?
Okay. In the Cameron area, we're talking about some people who live here we are not counting on.
Can I have you move closer to the microphone?
So in this area, we're counting with people that we're not counting on, are not legal here, but they're consuming.
Right.
Are we also consider that part, like a number?
Okay, so the demographic forecast is a population and household forecast. Now, we're technically using the household forecast. A household forecast is what we might call as an economic unit. For instance, my son graduates from college, he moves back home, he's earning his own income, files his own taxes. We would be 2 households in one building. So to the extent that you have illegal immigration here, and they're in the existing households, they would be counted in the household forecast. To the extent they are not represented as a household, they would be excluded. Truth is, I can't answer that because I don't know the depths of the economic forecast to see how illegal immigration was handled. But I can tell you that the population forecast is based on census data. So the United States Census Bureau collects the information, they report census numbers. I personally have never looked into it, but I understand they count people, whether legal or not, which seems to have been a political issue in this last election. Does that help answer your question?
It does, but I also know that because of what you just mentioned, people knowing that they are not legal here, they are not going to come up and say, count me on. So.
Absolutely. And that becomes an issue. I don't think we're going to be able to answer that fully today, but let me put it this way. When we get the forecast, we're going to put that into a statistical model. And we're going to build the relationship between households, an economic variable, and your residential customers. There's a relationship there. Okay, so now, over the last 10 or 15 years, if you've had population growth and you've had residential customer growth, there's a relationship. Statistical models maintain that relationship going forward. So to the extent that that forward-looking forecast has population increasing or decreasing based on whatever means that it increases or decreasing, that's represented in your residential customer count, which drives your energy forecast. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. Any other questions?
For the forecast on the residential, new residentials, are you considering that we have the same codes as other cities, or are you?
I'm sorry, repeat that, same homes as?
So usually every city has different codes or different variations of the codes, 2020, 2018, 2015, depending on the case. Are you doing a forecast if we stay with the same codes, or are you doing a forecast if we, let's say the city stays with the current codes for another 10 years, or are you doing a forecast, let's say we update on the codes every 2-3 years and we stay within the regulations for the insulation, for example?
Okay, that's a great question. So how are codes and standards really handled? Okay, so the first thing you need to know about how the models are built, let me touch upon this. We're going to build a specific model for the residential class. It consists of two models. How many customers are there, and then what does the average customer use? Kind of already talked about how the customer count is used. Your question moves toward, what is the average customer doing? Because in the future, we expect those new homes to be more efficient than the current homes. How is that handled? That the right way to characterize your question? Okay.
Yes.
The EIA data gives us 11 in-use information about the technology in a home, plus thermal shell information, think insulation, and that's all blended together in the residential model. Now, what's key here is that the EIA incorporates in those numbers, which we're using to drive the forecast, legally adopted codes and standards. Not speculative ones, not ones being negotiated or discussion. So in the context of your question, no, we aren't changing or assuming any new codes and standards. But if you adopted code and standard last year, say for refrigerators, the effect of that codes and standards will play out over the next 20 or 30 years. So in that context, yes, things are changing. Does that answer your question?
Yes and no. So, for example, just to give you an example, the city currently does the IRC, which is the residential code for the 2018, is very differently from the 2023 or 2024, which is a couple of inches more on insulation, which at the end of the day is a lot of extra electricity that you need to heat up or cool your house. So that's my question.
Right, and so the short answer is no, we have not accounted for that explicitly in the model. It would at best be picked up implicitly in the relationship, the statistical relationship captured in the model, but nothing explicit. Okay? Question?
How about political risk in terms of that energy policy where, like for example, today, President-elect Trump said that he wants no more windmills to be built in the U.S. and he wants to get rid of all subsidies.
Okay.
He might do that for other,
Right.
So how does that impact how you're going to protect?
So, once again, I'm on the demand side, so you're asking how does energy policy affect how people use electricity, okay? Once again, it's the same answer. It's got to be an adopted code and standard. This is even true, and the easiest one to point to is electric vehicles, right? Biden had issued a 2035 electric vehicle goal. That's not reflected in the forecast because it's not legally mandated. So policy recommendations, goals, they're excluded. Okay, does that answer your question? Yes, sir. Okay. Any other questions? All right, so what I have up here as a picture is the forecast method in bid boxes, easier to understand. Starts from the left. We're forecasting each of your primary classes, residential, general service non-demand, general service demand, municipal, and vapor lamps. Each of those are supported with statistical models. So we're building statistical models to capture their growth. Those statistical models rely on those key assumptions. We sum those together, that's going to give us total sales for the utility. Now, the beauty of breaking apart your system by class is because we fundamentally believe, or we would hope to believe, that your classes will grow at different rates. So we're picking up diversity in growth, or speed of growth. We sum them together, that gets us to total energy. Now I have a baseline total energy forecast. Now Rob had mentioned we need to get to hourly information. Everything up to this point is done with monthly data. How do we get to hourly information? We have to take one number for a month and spread it to the hours. We do that by forecasting, making a system peak model. So now I'm going to have monthly peaks, I have monthly energy, and then I'm going to model your system shape. I'm going to take all three of those things and basically put it in a box and shake it together to calibrate the shape to match the energy in the peak. So that first big yellow box represents the native demand forecast at the hourly level. The demand characteristics of the shape matches our monthly peak forecast, and the demand characteristics of the shape match the monthly energy forecast. One unified forecast. But we're not done there, because what we know about statistical modeling is statistical models take past relationships and project those relationships in the future. The problems we run into with new technology is there are no electric vehicles in the past. There aren't solar panels in the past either. Well, there's a few. So what we want to do then is we're going to develop independent forecasts for electric vehicles and solar. We're going to shape them to create the 8760s or the hourly demand profiles. And then we're simply going to add or subtract them to the native hourly demand forecast. Now we do this because we know that if you have a lot of solar on your system, it's going to move your system peak. I don't remember off the top of my head the exact hour of your system peak. I'm from California. I can tell our system peaks in my service territory about 7 o'clock at night. I can tell you about 5 to 10 years ago, it peaked at 4 in the afternoon. That doesn't happen because we all decide to do our laundry at 7 at night. It happens because saturations of electric solar panels on homes have increased significantly, to the point that last year in California, they had negative loads in April as a state. So as solar generation comes in, your peak will move. You cannot pick that up in a statistical model. It has to be picked up by adding and subtracting load shapes. So for electric vehicles and behind the meter solar, we're adding and subtracting load shapes. Solar is easy to understand. You get generation when the sun shines. Electric vehicles are not so much. All the information about electric vehicles and the studies on electric vehicles are all for early adopters. Clearly in this room, we have one early adopter. Early adopters are notorious for following the rules. You tell them to charge at 2 in the morning, they're going to charge at 2 in the morning. We do not know what mass adoption of electric vehicles is going to do. What is the average consumer? When are they going to charge it? How are they going to behave? We're not quite sure. So built into here are 3 charging profiles. One for residential, one for small, we call level 2 commercial, and one for the superchargers, think Tesla superchargers. So we get that from the federal government, the Alternative Fuels Data Center. They have done studies on electric vehicle. They manufacture profiles. We're using those profiles today to integrate into the IRP forecast. That gets added in, and that produces the net hourly forecast, which is passed on to Rob to do the supply side planning. Okay, how am I doing time? Am I way over time? No, you're good. All right. Okay, so that's the method. The strength of the method are really twofold: diversity in class, diversity in new technology. It picks up both of those. All right, so what happens? What's the result? Here's your base level forecast. The graph shows red and actual, the final forecast in blue. The yellow dashed line represents the native forecast excluding the electric vehicle and the solar forecast. What becomes notable here is notice the wedge developing on the very right-hand picture. We have an increasing penetration of behind-the-meter solar and electric vehicle. The fact that the yellow line moves to the blue line tells you only one thing, is that solar adoption is going to outpace electric vehicle adoption. Loads go down. Notice they start off similar, meaning that the impact happens late in the forecast period, not early. The average annual growth rates we're expecting to forecast as a final forecast are about 0.5% per year, which is comparable to what you've seen over the last decade or so, about 0.5% per year. Up there on the slide are comparative economic forecasting numbers. Just take a look at the household number. Historically, you've grown at about 1.1% per year. The Woods and Pool forecast is about 0.9% per year. Okay, so let's put some benchmarking onto that thing. We would expect if the historical growth rates in the economics are similar to the forecast, you're going to see a similar forecast. So a little bit lower on the households, but not significantly. The growth is primarily going to come out of the commercial class. Remember, this excludes those very large customer additions. So we're seeing at the bottom line a consistent forecast with your recent history. That gives me a level of comfort. There are no surprises. As a benchmark, we survey our customers across the United States every year. Our 2024 survey, which had about 100 electric utilities responding, representing over 60 to 70% of electric sales in the United States. Their residential sales growth on average is about 1%. So you are looking pretty close, a little bit slower than the average, but that average number will incorporate things like their electric vehicle forecasts as well. So not all that different. On a commercial basis, the commercial survey shows about a 1% average annual growth rate and a 2% industrial growth rate. So you're a little bit lower than that, but remember, that's a national number. And every region and every utility is a little bit different. That's what the energy forecast looks like. The peak forecast is consistent with the energy. They have to move together. Energy and peaks are interrelated. So we use the energy forecast to drive the peak forecast. Peaks are growing slower than energy, just a little bit. You can see that with the EV and PV in it, summer peak growth is growing, call it a 0.4%. I got 0.36 down there. Winter at 0.76. The native growth is running at about 0.5% for summer and winter. What becomes interesting when we look at the peaks is that the change in the growth rate is really driven by the EV and the PV adoption assumptions. Electric vehicles will drive winter peaks up because the adoption profiles say residential customers charge at night into the morning hours, not in the afternoon, because we're not going to incentivize them for the afternoon charging. Therefore, electric vehicle charging can affect winter morning peaks. 8%, not all of it, small percent. Behind the meter solar, it's happening in the summer, in the afternoons. That's when your peak occurs. It's going to depress those peak growth rates. Increasing solar adoption is going to decrease summer growth peak rates. So, system energy growing, call it about 0.5%, peaks kind of moving consistently with variations caused by EV and PV. Okay, I'm going to pause right there. That's the big picture overall system. Any questions? All right. Got just a couple more slides, and then you don't have to hear from me for the rest of the night. What are the scenarios looking like? The weather scenario slide, we flex up the weather up and down, extreme weather and mild weather. Think of it as confidence bands. What you see in the slide are energy confidence bands, summer and the summer peak and the winter peak. You've got numbers and growth rates over on the right-hand side. Probably the safest thing, couple things that I draw your attention to. On the weather scenarios, look at the bands around the winter peak. The reality on your system is that you have a lot of risk in the winter peak. It could be mild, it could be extreme. You don't have a lot of variety around the summer peaks. My guess is it's hot here and it's always hot. But that's not true on the winter side. So notice that sort of differentiation. Remember the 1 in 10 chance of occurring. All right, that's the weather scenarios. And the last one here is the large customer scenarios. This represents your largest risk. Just notice the big bump up there in the line. That represents an expected value of their customers coming in. We've identified 6 customers with a reasonable probability of occurrence. You see those numbers in the middle of the slide. The customers are hidden with numeric, but we have their size, their expected online dates, and then working with staff, we assign probabilities. So the way the scenario is built is customer 1, a 5 megawatt customer, expected to come in 2025 with certainty. That shows up in the scenario. Customer 2 is a 20 megawatt customer coming at the end of 25, 26, 80% probability. What we do in the forecast is we take the 80% multiplied against the 20 megawatts, and we add that product into the forecast. That's how the number is built. So the large customers, you can see, have the potential to increase a baseline summer peak from 300 up to on the order of 400. And that's the risk you face. It's done as a scenario. That's my last slide. So I'll pause once again to see if you have any questions about anything load forecasting wise.
Are those large customers industrial?
Yes.
Okay.
They would be put into the GS demand class.
Is the forecast based on the last 3 years, or is the forecast based on the last 20 years?
The GS demand forecast is based on 2009 to 2023.
Okay.
Or mid-2023.
And I'm asking that just because on the last 2 years, or maybe 3 years, we have seen an increment or an increase of industrial hubs. And the forecast might be a little bit off just because the trend has been changed on the past 3 years instead of the last 20 years.
Absolutely. It's a very interesting observation, right? Is the story in the ground is you're having new industrial customers, so the GS demand class loads are going up. I didn't see that in your data. If I were to pull up the GS demand energy data, it's nice and consistent. We're not seeing any sort of step up. Now, it could be that it happens second half of 2024, which is excluded from my analysis.
Yes, and that's because there's no industrial space available on the city. That's the other.
There's no repeat that?
industrial land available. So there's a reason behind not having many industrial new businesses. It is because we have, or the city has a lack of available spaces for industry to come in.
Okay. So what you're saying, if I understand this, is there's no land to build an industrial facility. That's why you haven't had growth in the industrial class in the last 4 or 5, whatever number of years.
And that's why we currently see an increase on the last 2 years, but we're gonna maybe be halted for a year until there's a little bit more industrial space.
Yeah, and that's where I would challenge your statement. You may see an increase from where you're sitting. We don't see it. I don't see it in the energy demand.
Okay.
And because of that, there isn't that step in the last year.
Okay. We have seen it just because a couple of buildings are currently being built out as we speak.
Okay, perfect. That's exactly why we don't see it in energy, but you're seeing it. You're building, they're not customers yet.
Correct. Yes.
Right. Okay. No, any other questions? Okay, with that, I'm going to turn it back over to you, Rob.
All right, thank you, Mark. Yeah, would you guys like to do a break at this time, or should we just continue through for a little bit? How's everybody feel?
A break would be nice.
Break?
Yes.
All right, 10-minute break. How about a 10-minute break?
Okay, it's 6:30. We'll get started again at 6:40.
So part of me is thinking, just flip through.
This is the general service line of energy, so you're probably looking at half, right? But if you look at the 2009, it's flat. Yeah. Right on time, girl.
Thank you. So next what we're going to talk about are the resource options that we're going to build into the model. So I mentioned to you earlier, and Mark just walked through, we put together a load forecast for the 25 years, and so that's been inserted into the model. We've taken a look at your existing generation and all your power purchase agreements and different contracts that you have, and we've incorporated those into the model. We have an energy price forecast that I went through last time. Those are all incorporated into the model. Fuel prices, all those different things. The one thing that I haven't had an opportunity to talk to you about is a little bit about the different resource options that we're going to be evaluating as part of this integrated resource plan. And that's what's listed here on this particular slide. So we're going to be building out in the model, and the way the model works, when we want to test out different portfolios, we can either run it in an optimization mode where we define generic units, and the model, when it's doing running the 8760 for the 25 years as it goes through, it actually calculates and optimizes which resources makes the most sense for Brownsville PUB. And so the model can actually, if we define these different types of assets or resources, if we actually define them, the model can actually sift through and say, hey, this is probably the best, given Brownsville's load, given the generation, what's in place, and what is falling off. It looks at, if a PPA or power purchase agreement is ending, it takes that all into consideration. And then it's also looking at, all the factors inside the model. It can actually recommend a resource plan out of that. Now, we don't always just go with that. We have to, kind of do some manual tests. And so we'll actually test some of these units as well. But, and I'm just going to quickly go through what these are. So reciprocating internal combustion engines, those are like diesels or Wärtsilä type engines. You have combustion turbines. You have combined cycles. You have battery energy storage. So we have, unit characteristics that we've put in the model related to those. Of course, wind. So we're going to look at wind, solar PV, both tracking and also co-located with battery, with BESS's battery energy storage. And then, of course, demand-side management and energy efficiency. So we're going to be looking at all these different resources, trying to figure out, well, what are the best fit for Brownsville PUB. The other thing that we're going to take a look at is we're going to look at over at Silas Ray. You have a steam turbine that is been around for a while, and we're going to look at basically if we continue to maintain that and what we need to spend on that over the next 25 years versus also looking at a replacement and seeing, basically how those economics pan out as well. So we're going to be doing all this as part of the evaluation, you know, for the resource plan. Just, I don't know if there's any questions. Does anybody have any questions related to what I just discussed there? Okay. All right. So then what we're going to talk about now is really what we're going to be doing for the next couple hours. So I've talked about this decision model, so the approach that we're using is a little bit unique in that, you know, everything that we've talked about up to now, I run the model, we get some economic information around, you know, if this resource plan is put in place, what's it going to cost Brownsville over the next 25 years, you know, and we can compare them against other plans. However, that doesn't necessarily, the least cost resource doesn't always warrant the best choice for a particular utility. And so what we want to figure out tonight is, are there other attributes that Brownsville wants to incorporate in part of the evaluation criteria? And what are listed out here are, you know, 7 criteria that are typically incorporated or evaluated at some level in any integrated resource plan that's done. Those items are, you know, environmental. You know, are there environmental attributes? There's some cities, some municipalities that want to have and accomplish, you know, a carbon a reduction goal. So, you know, that would be a criteria where we would look at the resources. All those resources that we just talked about, they all have different characteristics. You know, some of them are dispatchable, some of them are renewable, and so they're low carbon emitter, you know, type resources. And so we use these categories to try and characterize, you know, each of the different projects, so that we can help select the best fit for the city of Brownsville, or the Brownsville PUB. Another one is reliability and resiliency. So, and I'm going to talk about these in a minute. I'm going to give some more definition around what I mean by those, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the exercise that we're going to do. Another one that is often incorporated is social and economic. So these would be, you know, programs around, you know, does it bring jobs into the city or into the community, or are there environmental justice areas that need to be incorporated? It would be those types of things. Technical and operational. So this would be, you know, do we need dispatchable generation, or, you know, is there some operational characteristics? I had a utility where they set a goal to have 1,200 megawatts of solar. And so they did a PPA with that, and they did the analysis of it. But when they did the analysis, they didn't really take into consideration what that was going to do to their local generation. And so as a result, the local generation, which is really a baseload type generation, had to start moving up and down and up and down, because as the renewables came on and came off, the current system had to adapt for that. And so they've caused a lot of issues with their generation. And so those are the type of things that you think about when I talk about technical and operational. Risk and uncertainty, policy and regulatory, and customer cost and impact. And I'm going to go through these definitions in more detail. But here's what we're going to do. This is how we're going to approach the next couple hours. What I'm going to ask everybody to do, everybody has on their table some yellow stickies. And on those yellow stickies, what I'm going to be asking you to do is I'm going to be asking you to write down points that you think would be most important to capture when we're looking at these different resources, and what's most important to the Brownsville customers and to yourself. So for instance, you know, if and I'm just using carbon because it's, you know, it's the top one on the environmental one, but if you felt like for this community that it was important that the resource plan, incorporated a reduction in carbon emissions, you would write down a statement that you felt like the community was interested in that, and you'd write that on the yellow sticky. And then what we'll do is I'm going to have you go up and you're going to put the yellow sticky on the environmental sheet, which is over in the corner. It's number 1 over there. And I'm going to have you put it there. And then if you felt, another characteristic was reliability and resiliency, that was important for having local reliability or resiliency, or in order to meet peak demand, or whatever other attribute that you want to have. You'd write that down, and then you'd put it on that chart over there, which is number 3, which is reliability and resiliency. And so we're gonna go through and do that for maybe 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and then after that, we're gonna break up into 7 different groups. And you guys have numbers on your in front of you where you're sitting, and that's going to be the number that you're going to be assigned to. And so there's going to be 3 or 4 people, at each of these different charts. And then what you'll be doing is you'll be reading those yellow stickies, and you'll be trying to create statements of what those what you believe those yellow stickies are representing. So you're going to create a statement that we can use that basically summarizes, what has been put on those charts. And so you guys are going to work together in those smaller teams, and you're going to create statements for each of those different areas. And then you're going to pick one person on your team to do a presentation. And they're basically going to present the 2 statements or 3 statements that you come up with that summarize each of these. And then we're going to talk about that as a group as you present, after you present them. We're going to talk about it. And we're going to make sure that, whoever put those yellow stickies up there that we actually captured, their intent. So they'll have an opportunity to provide some more feedback on it. And then at the very end, so we're going to go through that. We're going to present all those. And then at the very end, there's some dots. And there's 6 dots for each person. And then what we're going to do, so let's just say we have 8 charts. Let's just say we have 2 statements, 3 statements on 8 charts. We're going to have 24 statements. And then I'm going to be asking you to go and put a dot on, and you can only put 1 dot on each statement. You can't put all 6 dots on one statement. And you're going to go around and you're going to put dots on the statements that you think are most important related to this topic. And then we're going to really quickly see. We might see a couple statements that's going to have 20 dots. We're going to see a couple statements that have 0 or 1 dot. And we'll quickly be able to really see what's important, at least from this particular group. And that's the process that we're planning to use. I'm going to stop now, just ask if there's any questions about the process that we're proposing to use here. Any questions? Oh, and there's no limit on the number of yellow stickies. So, I really would like you to, spend, whatever comes to mind, whatever thoughts you think should be captured as part of this resource plan that, related to the resources that we want to evaluate. Jot down as many yellow stickies as you want, and we'll put them up. And I didn't mention that, so I have the 7 categories all around the room, and then there's another one called Other, which is in the back. So if you have an idea, you want to express it and share it, and it doesn't quite fit into any of the, the criteria or the topics that we've put there, you just stick it under the Other. So any questions on that? So let's talk a little bit about, and if we could we switch to that other presentation? The other do I need to do it from here? Yeah.
Yeah, we did. The same model.
Okay, so, and this will work, yeah. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm just giving you some ideas around what might be incorporated under environmental. I mentioned a couple, but this will be a little bit more, detailed. So things that I would think would go under environmental, and it could be other. So if something falls outside this, you guys can just put it where you think it belongs. But things that we would think would go on item 1, which is environmental, would be anything related to greenhouse gas, carbon emissions, any objectives that you have related to that. If you were targeting, if you felt like NOx and SOx, sulfur or nitrous oxides or other pollutants were an issue, you'd put it under there. Anything related to land use or biodiversity. So if you were concerned about, or noise, or anything like that, that would also most likely be on that first chart, which would be environmental. And then another one that comes up sometimes is water usage, depending on where you are in the country. And so if there was a concern around water usage related to projects, and if you wanted us to be looking at and evaluating the projects based on water usage, that would be the place to do that. Okay. Now, as far as reliability and resiliency, so this is really related to resource adequacy. So this is, making sure you have enough resources to meet your peak. So if that was something of importance, you'd put it under that. Operational flexibility, we talked a little bit about that. And then resiliency around, to disruptions. So, extreme weather events, those types of things. If that's a concern, you would identify that on the yellow sticky. And then, I mentioned around social and economic. This is around economic development, job creation, community acceptance, and environmental justice. Technical and operational. So this is, grid compatibility, life cycle performance. Those types of things would be captured under the particular area. And again, if the key thing is to write down ideas that you have, let's capture them, put them up, and if we need to move them around, it doesn't, we can do that. So don't sweat too much over this. Policy and regulatory. So policy and regulatory, this could incorporate, do you want to focus on resources where you might be able to get, federal grants or money from the Texas Energy Fund? Or, should Brownsville have a policy on, again, it could be environmental, it could be, other policies. This is where you'd capture it here. And then risk and uncertainty, of course, this is fuel supply risk, market price volatility. If those are concerns, if we want to pick resources where we should be trying to hedge against some of these items, this is where you would incorporate that. And then the last one, which is customer impact, and this is also cost. So if, from your perspective, if lowering or keeping rates stable, keeping electric bills stable, if that's of importance, then you'd capture it on number 7 there, which is customer impact and cost. And so you'd capture that. How about any questions about what we're doing here? Yes, please.
Is there going to be someone like monitoring when people place their, because we might not know the exact category that we're putting our statement. So I don't know how you're going to do that.
So-
I mean, this is the first time I do the workshop, so I'm not sure if you're going to have
No,
someone
that's a great question. And so.
Sorry.
That's a great question. And so here's what we're going to do. I'd like everybody to be writing them out, and then we're going to come through and we're going to pick them up and we're going to put them in that location. And we might ask you what you were thinking, but we'll go ahead and do that. So you guys will just be writing
that
right
might
now.
be more challenging.
Yeah.
As to what category that particular statement goes to.
Yeah. And so right now, we just want you guys just
Right
identifying
away.
different things. Yeah, right away. and we're
Right
gonna
away.
Come around and we'll do it. So we're gonna target maybe 15 minutes to do that, but if we need more time, we'll take it. But let's see how we do for 15 minutes. And then when we do break out into teams, we've all been assigned different areas, and so we're going to be there helping you as you go through this. So go ahead, and we'll go ahead and start picking up.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be specific, it's just whatever you say. They'll figure it out. We need at least like that.
I will give you a meeting on economic development and the socio and economic.
You'll be the speaker. You're very good.
Paper access, I was going to ask you about the economic development. Do they ever have?
Rise in employment and rise in wages and rise in
Chester, I think this one gonna work. I got one for my first.
I've gone through 3, That's okay, I think, yeah, to use his own.
Yes, I got a new one. Thank you. Hi, I have a question. Gray. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
So on the yellow tags, what are you putting here? Things that we want.
Well, I was copying some of the ideas from over there, like, for example, the tax incentive eligibility for tax credit.
We're educating ourselves.
At the tables, please feel free to turn off the mics while the conversations are going on.
I don't know if I did it right, but I was going back,
Good to see you again.
and I was just putting like tax incentives, copying it from there, what stick, yeah, you know. Okay.
The energy grid.
A ver, no, this board. Yes. You don't want to add anything, okay? No, that's just for, yes. You're welcome. Got it. Did you do yours?
Yes.
Which rotary club? Oh, okay.
Thank you so much. See, I was working while you guys were talking. I already, no, they already picked them up.
They did? Okay.
Yes, I did 4, so I did my homework.
All right. All right, outdated infrastructure, natural disaster, so reliability, outdated infrastructure.
He was thinking outside the box.
Yeah. So I might put that reliability also, resiliency, maintenance, old technology equipment. Okay, I think that's, again, the politics. Let's see, politics would be, I'm going to do policy and regulation. Technology. Okay, hello? Can they hear me? Okay, I think we're ready to break up. So is everybody, yeah. Yeah. Hey, everybody, how about we break up into the teams? So, does everybody know what their number is? Okay, if you guys, if you know your number, it should be right in front of you where you're sitting. If you can go ahead to whichever chart you're responsible for.
Hold on, hold on. We're gonna, hold on.
Are we doing the dots already?
All right, everybody, I think we're ready to present now. And so, who wants to go first? All right, we got that. So, number one is environmental. So, now do we want to get a microphone? Let's get a microphone over there.
Okay, what we did in our section, number one, environmental, a couple of the little recommendations that were applied on these stickers. The first one would be that to select a project that limits water usage. There were concerns about the creation of what is called gray water, the dumping of gray water, the usage of water that limits the consumption of water in the community and so forth. The second one is select a project that reduces carbon emissions. Concern is that carbon is not good for the community, and therefore if we don't cut it off at this level through these projects, then that's not going to be something that's going to ever happen in Texas. And then the last one is consider incentives for the renewable generation. And so I know that there's a saying that fossil fuels are non-renewable energy, correct? And so what incentives do we have to consider and produce renewable energy, such as David's car, who runs on electricity, and mine does on carbon fuel, okay? And so that's what our presentation is.
All right, well, good job.
Hey.
Good job.
Thank you, David.
How about some questions? Like, does anybody have any questions or have anything to add to what they shared there? Any questions for the group? Did they capture anybody that has a yellow sticky up there? Did they miss anything in what they've said there? Okay, I think we're good. Let's move on to number two. Thank you.
Howdy, all. I did this one by myself, so all by myself. Okay, so really broke it down into 2 bullet points. First one is enable economic development by working with the city, and ensure that any development is not hampered by energy constraints, or at least on our side of things. Second one is ensure that the mission of the utility is to include the development of leaders inside the organization and outside as well. That's all I got.
All right. Very good. Okay, I'll ask again. Any questions for him while he's on the presentation of those items? Did he miss anything? Okay, all right, we'll go ahead.
Okay.
Let's go ahead and move on to number 3.
We're number 3, reliability. Were put up here, we kind of summarized it the best to our ability. So we came up with resources that are accessible to the consumers, should be reliable, long-term, be resilient to natural disaster / weather conditions. So we based that summarization on the statements that we received. Is there any question? Has any input? Maybe you put something up here we didn't cover or we didn't get.
No, very good, great. All right, if we can move to number 4.
Okay, number 4, technical and operational. So I'm gonna rate it, but I'm gonna explain it. Great compatibility. We want resources that support the integration of intermittent power sources, basically. When we have our phones, I carry my charger and a USB and maybe another thing. So that's basically what this is saying. We need different sources. We need to have different areas where we can access energy. The second one, we want the diversified power sources that will insulate BPUB from swings in the fuel prices. So basically, it goes about the same thing. In my purse, I have cash, a credit card, a checking book. I have different ways that I can access money. At the end, it's energy. At the end, is what I need. But how am I going to access it? In different ways. So basically, for me, the way I was a group of one, but I had a lot of help. Technical and operationally trying to find different ways of getting energy without causing a big problem with one of them. Any questions? They'll answer.
Yeah. That was very good. Yeah. Good job. All right, you're up.
All right, hi everyone. I had number 5, policy and regulatory. We had 4 responses, and we summarized it into one statement. Using our political capital, select projects that qualify for state and federal funding or grants, all the while building trust with the community. So in terms of state funding, really the state's funding dispatchable power, and in the federal side is more renewable. So that's possibly going to change, but that's the current landscape. But I think that encompasses the responses here.
That's good. Yeah, that's really good.
Hello, everyone. Had number 6, risk and uncertainty cost. The first bullet point is prioritize resources where impact of market price volatility can be minimized. I'm gonna jump number 2 for a reason. Number 3, favor resources that have lower new technology and/or cyber risk. We have seen that cybersecurity has been one of the biggest issues on with government facilities or issues. On the second one, this was based on the bullet point, but I don't agree with it. Avoid taking risk of new large customers that could suddenly leave. Honestly, as an example, on 2007, 2008, I think the city took a risk with the Titan building. With the Titan building, they built a substation with it. The Titan building didn't work too well for a couple of years. However, we're seeing it 10, 15 years from that day that they did it, that it is currently working. So I kind of didn't agree with this because of that. I think we need to just focus on the future and invest a little bit more, and something good will come out of it.
All right.
We're going to do this one short and sweet. This one is customer impact cost. So as we were looking through our little notes, the majority mentioned lower rates. So it says select a strategy that offers rate stability or to lower a rate, or also adopt a tier structure, which is fees, to so we can have basic rates, for example, for projects or housing size. And this is basically what we came out with. Okay, thank you.
I'm just going to jump on this one because I'm noticing that there's one sticky on here, and we didn't cover this one, which is other. So
Here,
I'm just
you know
gonna
what?
cover it.
I can jump on that. You get 2 for the price of 1 since I wrote that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I'll just fess up to everything. And what the note says is extreme transparency. And so what this particular function is right now, what we've been trying to do for the past few years, is put all our decision-making out there so that the community can see and answer any questions that we're able to answer so that everybody knows what's going on, why we've decided things, everybody will be able to trace our IRP back to this video, which should be freely available online, and understand exactly why we made the decisions we made. So that's that one.
That's great. All right. Okay, so now that we've done that, and we've gone through and we've presented, now this is the next step that we want to do is, so everybody has 6 dots in front of them. And what I would like everybody to do is, now that you've heard all these different statements, I want you to put 1 dot next to the 6 statements that you feel are most important. Go around and, maybe it might make sense to go around, just reread everything so you know exactly where you want to put your 6 dots. But what we wanted to get a sense is to, are there any specific ones that we can see, significant number of people that are interested in that particular one. So does everybody understand what we're going to? Yeah, so we're going to, no, on the statement itself. So for instance, on this one, you just put the dots, and then we would see, if there's a grouping of dots, and then we're going to be able to look around the room and see what are the statements that are most important to this group. All right? So go ahead when you're ready.
All of our dots, right?
Yeah, all 6, and you can only do 1 dot per statement. So no 6 dots per statement. Hear me? Yes, it's working now. Okay, so, this was a great exercise. And so I'm gonna just make sure we highlight some things to the board. What basically you are telling the Brownsville PUB board. Reliability and resiliency has the most dots. It's got 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 dots. 9 dots, right? And so this is resources that are accessible to consumers, should be reliable long-term, and resilient to natural disaster and weather conditions. So this is something that we should be, as it seems like we're hearing that this should be a significant factor when we're looking at the different resources that we're looking at in this resource plan. Are there any questions, any comments from the board or from the staff? Any questions around this? No. And then I think it's kind of interesting. This is another one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 also. Ensure mission of utility is to develop leaders inside the organization and in the community as well. So just, a statement, just something, I guess, to absorb. These are 3. Is there another one that's around the room that? So yeah, here's one that has 5 dots. So select projects that qualify for state and federal funding. So the idea of, in our resource plan, that we should be looking for projects that we think we can apply for funding and get support. That makes sense. Are there any, any other, like as I'm stating this, is there anything else that we want to add to that? So that's, and then what else? Here's one over here. And I'm actually surprised. So this has 6 dots. Select the strategy that offers rate stability and lower rates. So that's another high dot one. And adopt a tiered structure fees proportionate to the project and the house size. So this first one, I think, is more related to when we're looking at resources, we want to try and have rate stability in the selection process, and we can measure that, and we can look at the different resources on that. And then this one, adopt a tiered structure fees. This is almost like a rate comment, some rate making. So I don't know if you guys have any questions on that, but that was something that came up. So, I think we've hit the highest number of dots. Did I miss any?
There's the extreme transparency one, and not just because I wrote it.
Oh, they are. Yeah. So there's 5 here. Okay. And this was the one that we almost missed, which was about extreme transparency. So that's 5 dots. And so as we build in this process, we're going to continue to, share through these workshops. And, maybe there'll be some additional ideas on how we can, continue to involve the community. But that's a really important one. So, I think, unless I've missed something, I think really we've covered and we've accomplished what we set out to do tonight. What we wanted to do is we wanted to get input from the community, which we have. We've gotten input on what you see as the priorities in Brownsville's endeavors to figure out its resource plan going forward. And I believe we can incorporate all these factors into the process. And so we will do that. We'll summarize this, and the way that you'll if you can appreciate what we'll be doing next time. So when we come back for the next workshop, which is February 26th. We're going to basically have analysis done. We're going to have candidate resource plans. So we're going to have a couple resource plans that, based on this input, we think scored the highest. We're going to share kind of how we went about accomplishing that, and why, you know, so we'll work with the Brownsville staff, you know, to develop that, and then we'll talk about it. And then in our next workshop, you'll be, of those 2 or 3 highest you know, the best choices, you'll be providing your input on which one you think is the best, which one you would recommend. And then, of course, ultimately, you know, the board needs to make its decision, you know, on that. But you know, we'll definitely be able to provide the community's input into that. So that's really our process. That's our next step. Are there any questions about where we're going from here? How did everybody feel about this, this approach?
Yeah, we'd love to have some feedback if you have that now.
Yeah.
It was a good idea to integrate everything and do it with cooperative learning, collaboration, so that we can all get involved and understand the processes and understand the steps, and that makes it very, I guess, more understandable for us as a consumer, because y'all are the experts, so to speak, and so I think it's a good way to collaborate, communicate, which is really important, and to be in the level of understanding of what's going on, and educate us as well, and we're the voice for the community, so it helps us understand, to explain questions, concerns. So it was a very good idea. It was the first time that I was involved, so it was, y'all, kudos to you. You did a great job.
Great, thank you. That's great.
I love the fact that you, as PUBCAP members and all of us here, we were able to elaborate and talk to each other and gather our ideas and trying to find out how is it that, okay, the notes, what is it that they're trying to tell us, and what is it that we're trying to tell you, you know, about this project. So it was very interesting. It was our first time here.
That's
So.
great. That's great. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Other comments?
Lena, I think you might have had a comment.
Yes, I did. So there's a clarification on the date, the February 26th workshop. It's probably going to be moved to the beginning of March. So we'll work with you all's calendars and get back to you on the exact date.
This is a great time. I mean, for us, that we work, so this is a good time so that we can make it.
Okay.
Because it's hard during the day, because most of us work during the day. It's hard for us to get off.
Definitely.
That would be something, you all can consider that again.
Of course.
Well, I actually, as a board member, feel the same way.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you, guys. I think that's all. Okay, well, thank you for coming over tonight again, and we really appreciate all of your feedback, and we look forward to continue to work with you all. Have a good night. Thank you for coming. Bye-bye.
Just really quickly, one piece of bookkeeping, since we opened this meeting, it is, for the PUB board, it is now 8:05, and we are ending this public workshop. Thank you guys very much. The gavel's over there, so I can't hit it, but just imagine me doing it. We got it.